Good day, and welcome to this webinar brought to you by Secure Meters and Metering and Smart Energy International. With the imminent rollout of smart metering, this webinar will examine the current position of prepayment metering in Great Britain, along with the advantages and disadvantages, and how some of these are being addressed, or not, by the Smart Metering Equipment Technical Specification, otherwise known as SMET, which forms the basis of the design of GB Smart Metering. We'll consider some of the following: how the government will enlighten domestic energy customers of the GBSM rollout, the use of smart tokenless prepayments in Ireland and lessons learned, what's missing from GB specifications that could make prepayment easier and smarter prepayment options that could enable the vending options, automatic top-up from microgeneration export, how smart apps could assist in not only load control but also in low account load prioritization, and energy source selection. Now, with us this afternoon, we have Phil Ketlis, who has been involved in energy metering for over 30 years. Phil was the metering manager for Eastern Electricity and joined Secure Meters in '97 as the prepayment solutions product manager, and has been instrumental in developing their Liberty Keypad prepayment solution. He is currently Secure Meters compliance manager and is coming to us all the way from India today. Phil, welcome, and thanks so much for joining us. Additionally, we have William Rowe, who's part of the senior team that helped OVO become an energy retailer, leveraging smart metering technology to develop an innovative customer proposition and reduce costs to serve. Now, OVO have gone early into the UK smart metering rollout, and William has been focusing on ensuring the early mover advantage and that it's being realized, whilst at the same time minimizing the risks associated with moving early. Will, to you too, thank you very much for joining us from the UK. What I will do, Phil, if you don't mind, is I'll hand over to you and let you get started with the webinar.
Thank you, Claire, and good day to you all, wherever you are in the world. I'd like to start really by looking at the perspective of the GB smart metering specifications. You may be aware that smart meters are being rolled out in Great Britain. This is a government plan. The idea is to bring its energy services and systems up to date and help with managed CO2 emissions. It involves electricity and gas suppliers replacing more than 50 million electricity and gas meters in more than 30 million homes and businesses by 2020. Smart meters will not be mandatory. Consumers can, if they wish, decide not to have them installed. This is a big concern to the government. As more people, if they opt out, the benefits will not be realised for the government's plan. And we'll see as I go through the presentation what the government is trying to do to tackle this concern. For those who choose to have a smart meter, the government set rules and standards to ensure that the consumers are protected and get the full benefits from their meters. Amongst these rules are those that will be looking at the technical standards, the design and the use of the smart metering equipment, rules to meet the needs of vulnerable and at-risk people, and also rules for data access so consumers always have a choice of what their data is used for. And there'll be rules around security, which is obviously a big concern in many smart metering projects, to make sure systems and data that they contain are secure. In this webinar, we'll look at the following: the rollout of smart metering in Great Britain, the current use of prepaid meters in Great Britain, how smart metering is addressing or not addressing the current issues faced by prepayment customers, and how prepayment could become smarter via the use of smart meters. Will, when I hand over to him, will then give a view from the Great Britain Energy Retail's point of view. And if time permits, as Claire's already said, we'll try and answer some of your questions. If we're unable to do so, I'm quite happy to take those on board and answer them over the next few days if you send them as an email to us. So, what is a smart meter? If you Google that question, you'll find many answers. From a Great Britain point of view, a smart meter is an electricity meter or a gas meter that is capable of two-way communications. Like traditional meters, they measure and record energy consumption. They also have two-way communication capability that allows data to be read remotely and displayed on the device within the home or transmitted externally to a head-end system. These meters can also receive information remotely to update their tariffs, switch between credit mode and prepayment mode or vice versa, and if operating in prepayment mode, receive top-ups over the air. As part of the rollout, customers can also be provided with an in-home display, also known as an IHD in the specification. which provide up-to-date information about how much electricity and or gas is being used in terms of costs or kilowatt hours being consumed. You may be surprised to know that prepayment energy meters have been in use in Great Britain for over 100 years. Up until the 1980s, these were coin-operated meters requiring coins to be inserted to pay in advance for energy being consumed. In the 1980s, this changed to physical token-based solutions employing either a plastic card, similar to a credit card, or a plastic key, both of which had microchips embedded within them. These allowed credit to be transferred digitally from a vending terminal to a meter, and the tokens were linked to respective meters to ensure security. However, unlike the coin-based solution, where a customer could conveniently add credit to the meter by inserting more coins in the meter in their home, physical tokens required the customer to visit a physical outlet to have digital credit added to the token. This was not always convenient, as quite often the top-up terminal could be some distance away from the customer's home. In addition, there were often issues for whatever reason the token would not be topped up, or once topped up, the credit couldn't be transferred from the token to the meter. Usually this is because the token had become faulty, or its contacts or inside the meter, contacts there had become contaminated. In addition, if the token was lost or misplaced, then the top-up could not be performed until that token was replaced or found. Unfortunately, many of these issues resulted in inconvenient self-disconnection, which the customers added to the stigma around prepayments. In 2000, Northern Ireland Electricity, an electricity company operating in Great Britain, introduced a tokenless solution for its prepayment customers, which used top-up codes similar to those used in the mobile phone industry. This made the solution highly acceptable to consumers who liked the solution because the top-up code could be conveniently dispensed from multiple top-up sources. With no physical token issues and inconvenient issues relating to tokens disappearing and being lost, this reduced the operating cost and the cost of service significantly, allowing NIE to charge prepaid customers the same for their energy as credit customers. It should also be noted that this was also the first metering solution in Great Britain which provided customers with an in-home display. Today, the solution is used in Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland by numerous retailers, with over 600,000 customers paying for their electricity in this way. Because top-ups are purchased via encrypted codes, customers could then obtain their top-up codes via numerous channels. Excuse me. Traditional outlets, as used by the physical tokens, were obviously one, but they could also be purchased over the internet, via websites, maintained by the retailers. They could be purchased over the phone from the retailer's call centres or for an IVR system, an interactive voice response system. Or, as is done in the present day with some retailers, they could be dispensed through mobile phone apps. If the top-up code was misplaced or lost, it was easily reproduced at any vending source at virtually no cost, unlike the physical token solution we talked about earlier. The security embedded in the top-up code ensured that they were meter-specific and could only be used once by the target meter. So let's take a look at GB Smart Metering. Since its publication of SMETS 1, the Smart Metering Technical Specification, approximately 1 million smart meters have been installed in Great Britain, all of which should be capable of supporting both prepayment and credit modes of operation. I say should, as currently only 1 or 2 retailers and 1 manufacturer is offering a full SMETS 1 prepayment capable meter. SMETS 2, the final metering specification, will be finalised this year and will start the rollout of smart metering in Great Britain sometime in 2016. Smart Energy GB is an organisation which was formerly known as Smart Metering Central Delivery Body, which is the government has tasked to engage with the public to ensure that the programme is successful. They've appointed Sir Bob Geldof to front the campaign, who, along with 2 mascots, Gaz and Lecky, as shown in the photograph above, will explain to the general public the benefits that can be derived from smart metering to ensure that the public do not opt out. At this time, the majority of the GB public do not know what a smart meter is or what benefits can be derived from having them. Not only is this an ideal time to educate them regarding the benefits of smart metering, it's also the ideal time to overcome the stigma associated with prepayment meters. Many people, rather than being billed in arrears, would rather pay for their energy as they do for all their other consumables such as car fuel, food, that is, in advance, what I call pay as I go. Prepayment specification builds on the prepayment function used in Ireland. Customers will then enter the meters using numeric codes. They will have a non-social non-disconnection regime, which will not disconnect them in the evenings or at weekends and on public holidays when their credit runs out. SMETS even uses the same name for this feature as used in Ireland, friendly credit. In addition to supporting prepayment functionality, customers will be offered an in-home display, also called an IHD. They will be provided with current and historical consumption and cost of consumption data. They will have a numeric prepayment top-up code sent to the meters over the air. And they will have the ability to enter a top-up code via the meter if, for whatever reason, it's not being received by it. SMETS 1 and 2 require that an IHD provides a certain amount of information defined in the specification. But how much is this really useful? My slide is not working, so there we go. Sorry about the delay there. So how much is this really useful? Prepayment customers are really only interested in knowing how much money is in the meter and what's left in the account. They also want to know when their account is running low and is in need of a top-up. They may be interested in data they have on. Some even might be interested in consumption data and historical data. But the one piece of crucial data which is provided in Ireland and missing from SMETS, which Irish customers found very useful, is how long will my credit last in the meter. We will revisit this later in our presentation. SMETS requires smart meters to display basic prepayment data, support locally entry at the meter of a UTRN, a unique transaction reference number, which is the SMETS name for a top-up code, if for whatever reason it's not being received by the meter. If we look at the current smart meters being installed in Great Britain, since the publication of SMETS, only one meter manufacturer is supplying a smart meter with a keypad allowing easy entry of a UTRN. For all other meters, it's an awkward combination of pressing 2 or 3 keys to scroll through, select, and enter a digit of each part of the UTRN number. This is a backward step from the smart metering perspective. Current energy meters are often located in hard-to-reach and awkward places, such as outside cupboards, garages, under staircases, or at high levels and hallways, making them hard to read or even harder for customers to interact with, especially in prepayment. SMETS overcomes some of these issues. With smart metering having communications capability, there's no need to read the meter, as this can be done remotely via GPRS. And the provision of an IHD will allow easier consumption engagement for consumers in terms of the data being provided from the meters. But if it supports basic prepayment data, then customers will once again be crawling under stairs, standing on chairs or going outside, and they have to manually enter a UTRN, which would not be good from a smart metering perspective. Current IHDs being offered in Great Britain, with the exception of one, do not have a UTRN entry interface and support only the display of basic prepayment data. So even if a customer had an IHD, if a UTRN is not received by the meter, they will have to interact with the meters no matter where they are located. On the positive side, I must stress that this is only a problem when there is a need for manually entering a UTRN, which should be a rare occurrence. But it's something that could be included in the specification of a smart metering solution from the start. SMETS 2 may go some way to overcoming this, as it proposes a prepayment metering interface device known as a PPMID, which can be considered as an enhanced IHD with additional prepayment functionality, such as a user interface for entry of UTRNs. It's interesting, however, to note that SMETS 2 uses the word optionally in its requirements. So, as smart metering rolls out in Great Britain, post-publication of SMETS 2, we could see prepayment customers having 2 devices in their home along with their smart meters. A basic IHD, providing basic data on prepayment and consumption, and a PPMID to interact with the prepayment functionality. However, SMETS 2 also specifies a third device, a consumer access device also known as a CAD, which could be offered to consumers so read-only data can be taken from their meters to provide useful information for home automation. Some prepayment customers could find themselves now facing 3 different devices in their home, all doing slightly different functions, all consuming electricity. This could result in confusion as to which device to interact with to get the desired functionality, creating negative feedback from consumers regarding the need for 3 devices in the home, supporting smart metering, taking up 3 power outlets in the house, and consuming electricity which they are paying for. Hopefully, manufacturers and energy suppliers will get their act together and provide only one interface that does all of these functions, and hopefully provide more useful functionality than just the basic functionality in the Smith specification. With that comment in mind, what does the future hold? With a large amount of public in Great Britain owning a smart or smart-enabled phone or tablet, there are an increasing number of home automation applications which can run on these devices. Smart lighting, television control, heating control, and as we mentioned earlier in this presentation, prepayment top-up apps. You can see a few examples in this slide. All of these are very real and in use today. In fact, I use several of them myself. The government's vision of smart metering states that it will provide accurate and timely bills based on remote meter readings, historical data and cost of consumption for budgeting, vending convenience for prepayment customers. And you can see in the slide above that there are other benefits that customers may be able to achieve. But there are other benefits that could be specifically benefit prepayment customers if it's thought about and given the time. The diagram above shows you an example of what a smart home could look like in the future. In addition to the various retailing sources of vending as described above earlier, account alerts could be sent to mobile devices with alerts becoming persistent or even the colour of the screen changing depending on the level of credit left. Remember what I said about the missing functionality in Smiths, how long will my credit last? This could be tied into the mobile phone app. You could also display amount of credit left in an indicative indication of how long it will last based on, say, an average of the last 7 days consumption. Heating control apps allowing heating of both room and hot water to be controlled remotely by a smartphone or tablet are very real now. Again, these could be tied into the credit alert so that the heating is still available, but is prioritised to enable low credit to last longer until a top-up can be made by the consumer. This could also be done for domestic appliances, with consumers electing via their app the non-essential loads they want disconnected when a low credit alert occurs. With the growth in microgeneration, why bother reading a meter export register and then crediting the consumer by a check or payment for his energy he's exported? Or have the meter top up its own payments account based on the hour buy energy and the purchase price of that energy. Simple security checks would ensure the function is not abused. The possibilities are endless if we apply our minds and think outside the box. If we don't, we're in very real danger of enabling only a very small amount of the benefits that smart metering could provide to both prepayment and credit customers. We'll now hand over to Will, who will give a further insight from the energy retailer perspective.
Bill, thanks very much. I'm going to assume everyone can hear me because there's no feedback on my line, so I assume it's fine, so I'll carry on. I'm speaking to you from OVO Energy. I just wanted to give a bit of context as to who OVO are, where we're positioned in the market, and then our experiences around prepayment. So first up, who are OVO Energy? So we launched in 2009. We're founder-owned. So Stephen Fitzpatrick, our founder, didn't come from an energy background and decided that the UK energy space was a great place to launch his first business. We've since then grown to 450,000 customers, all acquired competitively in what is a competitive market in the UK, and have basically focused on quality and service being our biggest thing. So pricing-wise, we've always found ourselves to be very competitive. The UK is pretty much dominated by 6 large utilities, and I guess in short, they tend not to price particularly aggressively for consumers. So we've managed to price ourselves better than the big 6 in the majority of cases, and we deliver much better customer service. The big 6 historically all came from vertically integrated utilities, or still are vertically integrated in the majority of cases, and so never really focused on the retail operations. We are exclusively a retailer, and therefore are acutely aware of how important it is to deliver great service to our customers. So you see from the slides, we're top right quadrant in this quite useful slide from our perspective. We've got 3 main propositions in the market at the moment. Pay monthly, which in essence would be, I guess, what most people would view as the typical proposition that's in any kind of market, which is a meter that you would get billed for, and then you pay your bill. I guess the slight difference with our version there is that we pay 3% interest for customers with credit balances. So we've driven a positive working capital cycle on those customers by paying them an interest reward. On the pay-as-you-go side, that's a newer product for us, and I'm going to talk through that in a bit more detail. But in essence, that was our real reason for venturing into smart metering. And the final one, and an interesting one, which really plays on a specific in the UK, is a community energy platform. So for those of you who are technology savvy, we looked at the kind of Amazon Web Services model and decided that the UK energy market required an equivalent product. And energy is not quite the same as servers in Iceland, but what energy is the UK has got a big push at the moment to deal with fuel poverty and to try and decentralise some of the energy and allow sort of local community groups and councils and housing associations and local authorities to provide fairer tariffs to their customers. And so we, in essence, launched a white label community energy platform that says to any community, kind of regardless of size, if you want to offer a tariff to your customers based on a geographical sort of community, you can use our infrastructure, so our trading relationships, our billing capability, our customer services if you'd like to, and our marketing capability to do something different in your area. You tell us what the tariff is, you tell us what features you want, and we'll just put it in the market and support you. So it means that, the principle for them is that they are really trying to, there's not really a lot of value for a community going into the market and just giving the same tariff as what we could offer. They need to have something else that they want to bring to the table, and what they normally do is they in essence take the profit, the sort of 4 to 3% net margin that's kind of typical profit margin in the UK, and they tend to subsidise the tariffs of the fuel poor, or they use it to invest in generation assets that are going to benefit the community, or they look to deal with sort of maybe local network issues, come up with more resilience or deployment of new technologies. So in essence, what it's meant to do is deliver a community-focused, unique proposition in the market that lets that community deliver some value to those residents that, OVO as a national brand doesn't have the capability to really understand every community's specific need, but we can help with providing some of the core skills we have. So I guess focusing on pay-as-you-go, which was kind of the main scope of the call, our pay-as-you-go proposition is the first in the UK to be kind of purely app-based. So we use Secure's meters and we interface with them via the head-end system, and in essence allow. We talk about, sorry, I just read one of the questions and I got slightly distracted. Our pay-as-you-go proposition, so we use Secure's head-end system, and we've built an app for consumers to be able to completely manage their energy using the app. So it does all of the things you'd expect, kind of from telephony prepay. So it does load balance alerts, so all the stuff Phil described as well, really. And we used the mobile market as a good case study as when we built the product. And I guess I wanted to talk through what our experience has been to date. So you can see from the slide, we've acquired modest numbers of customers up to October 14. From relatively quick launch, we're up to 15,000 customers. So from zero within, you can see we only started pushing the proposition in May. It was relatively good customer acquisition. I think right now we're up to about 80,000 prepay customers. So it's a very popular proposition, and they're all signing up to us in a competitive marketplace because of the smart prepayment functionality. And the reason they do that is a number of factors. A big one for us is price. The market over here for prepayment customers is not very competitive. We can sit in the market with a good gross margin tariff for us that's still significantly cheaper than the big six. So the price is a significant factor there, but the big ones are convenience. Customers switch just because it's convenient, because it helps them use less energy, and because it's just a good proposition. They feel in control, it leverages technology, and they enjoy the experience. The customers that have it absolutely love it at the moment. And we're trying to keep innovating in that space to make sure that the product continues to deal with more segments' requirements. I guess finally, if I may, benefits to us as a retailer. So in addition to the acquisition benefits, the retention benefits that I guess are clear from the growth we've had and and the kind of customer satisfaction. Clearly, a customer that likes the proposition and can understand that it's unique in the marketplace would be more likely to be our customer for a long amount of time. So in a competitive market, that's a very useful thing to have. But the big ones, I guess, in the background are that it's reduced our operating costs. So pay-as-you-go is a great solution for allowing us to provision less of bad debt. It's much harder for those customers to run into payment difficulties and be in arrears. So we proactively market and help customers who are likely to be in a credit sort of situation, migrate them onto pay-as-you-go. And we also acquire customers on pay-as-you-go who are potentially higher debt risk to other utilities that we can support because we have a solution to that allows us to provision less for those customers. Other ones are obviously, because it's a smart meter and it's a connected smart meter, we get meter reads, we get alerts, so we can reduce our emergency visits to site. We don't have to send meter readers, so we just have a lower kind of metering related cost in our business. And finally, lower propensity to contact, and this is a big one. I don't know what it costs other utilities, but calls into the contact centre in the UK cost somewhere between, say, £5 and £20, depending on how efficient you are at dealing with the call. We find that our pay-as-you-go plus customers' propensity to contact us is significantly lower than a normal customer, a pay monthly or a dumb pay-as-you-go customer. And the reason for that is manifold. One, we can see things happening earlier, so we can proactively speak to, use digital driven that customer. Another is that there's no longer that reason to ring us up and sort of say that that the meter's not working because we can check it remotely, and as much because of the app-based top-ups, there's no reason to contact us because it's all very clear. When you're going to run out of money, and you can make top-ups with ours is 2-click top-up. So it's a bit like the Amazon 1-click, but it's OVO 2-click. Finally, I guess group level benefits or financial benefits. It's working capital positive, so it's cash flow positive, and it's very useful for all utilities to have that. The bad debt provision obviously is hugely beneficial, and trading benefits. So we find it easier to offer a variable or less long-term hedged contract to those customers, and because we have accurate consumption data, because we get very real feedback on we do ours at midnight every day. We get readings for those customers, so we can plan and model and understand the consumption for those customers much better, which allows us to make better trading decisions. So those are really all the points I wanted to cover, and I believe now we're going to go over to questions. I think some have been coming in and I think they've been answered, but from my perspective that's everything I wanted to share, so I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Phil and Will. I really appreciate the time that you've put into both preparing and delivering these the presentations. We do have a couple of questions that have come through. And Phil, I'd like to direct one of them to you, please. And that is, assuming the UK features a 41% share of smart gas meters in 2015, or how will this share change by 2020 in your eyes? The speaker says, or the person asking the question says, I highly doubt that there will be a stronger growth than 5% CAGR. Would you like to perhaps give some insight into that?
Yeah, I did answer this question online, but I was trying to figure out where the question was coming from, because obviously the volume of gas meters in the UK or in Great Britain are obviously fixed. They're obviously growing at a slight proportion as obviously new builds happen, but all the gas meters, the government are envisaging all gas meters used in small businesses and by the domestic consumers will be upgraded to smart meters. And that volume is somewhere in the region of about 20 million meters. So they will sort of upgrade if the customers opt in. So I'm not quite sure what the question is aiming at there.
Okay,
because obviously the plan is to upgrade all the gas meters.
Okay, Maximilian, perhaps you'd like to add a little bit more to that via the question the question box so that we could perhaps answer that in a little bit more detail. Then Louise says, in the presentation you talk about electricity, energy and gas. His question is, what about water?
Yes. You've got to remember that the sort of primary driver for SMETS is to improve the energy infrastructure. In the long term, they'll be looking to enable the smart grid functionality. It's also there to help, the UK provide its target of reducing carbon emissions. Water figures in there because the specification does talk about other devices being, sort of brought into the smart home and connected to the home area network in the longer term and through the wide area network. It doesn't figure at the moment in the infrastructure, but it could be included. There are additional devices that can be included in the home area network for the generation meters. People are talking about car charging. There might be a separate meter associated with car charging where the data is then brought back through the home area network into the wide area network and goes back to the respective head end. We talked about PV. Obviously, using these microgeneration meters. At the moment, the export register's red. The tariff supplied and the customer gets money for the amount of energy he exports. So the smarter home will come along. Water will figure in this as well in the longer term. If we look at the history of Secure, when it was PRI in the UK, before we became part of the Secure Group, we had a Calendar technology back in the 80s, which did gas, water and electricity and had a keypad interface. So, water is doable. As to when, it's hard to say because at the moment the primary focus is, we've got around about 4 years to deliver smart metering infrastructure for 30 million homes.
Okay. Will, do you have anything that you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, just a couple of things from us. So I guess first, as Phil was saying, the UK project specifically around electricity and gas because of a number of reasons, network related and peak load problems, I guess, being two of the big drivers. A big part of the rationale or the kind of overall business case for smart meters in the UK and net present value of £6 billion is driven by a reduction in demand of circa 3% off the back of smart meters being deployed at a customer level and load shifting, so reducing the peak. In the UK we have a peak demand problem. We use diesel generators and stuff like that, and we have to call upon these, and so there's a big benefit there to try and remove some of that peak from behavioural changes. I guess therefore for water, as you can imagine, you don't really get you don't get short-term peak demand, so there's a lot less of a business case around justifying the smart meter, and it's not a competitive market, so it's very difficult in the UK to have a proposition that's around water. We have I think in the UK it's a human right to have water, so prepay in the water space isn't a concept that exists, and turning water off or smart metering water to sort of deal with problems again is not really there. So I think the world of water meters is very different and not one that really has the same critical infrastructure nature in the UK.
I come from South Africa, and I know that we have had some very interesting test cases go through our court system around the implementation of smart metering and prepaid metering specifically for water. And basically the court has come to the conclusion that as within the UK, it is illegal to cut somebody off, but what they can do is restrict the flow. So we do have prepayment meters for water here, just in order to manage the resource. I think that perhaps is one of the bigger benefits that you would see from a water utility side, is managing things like non-revenue water and leakage. But I guess from the socio-economic side, that's where it really does become a bit of a challenge. So speaking of which, there is another question, Will, which I think I'm going to direct to you, and that is, what age groups or income demographics is the pay-as-you-go program or offering appealing to?
Yep, okay, great. So it's a really interesting one. So I guess in the UK there's 4 million of 25 million, so roughly 20% of the market. I think it's exactly 18% of the market is a pay-as-you-go customer in the UK. And the majority of those customers, I guess, have been converted to pay-as-you-go or prepayment over the last 10 years, probably generally due to a kind of a revenue protection related incident. So either the customer's got into arrears or it was a tenanted property or one of those kind of functions. However, of those 4 million prepayment customers, only 600,000 currently have debt on the meter that's being recovered. So I guess the interesting thing there is roughly 70% of all customers in the UK on a prepayment meter are remaining on it out of choice. Because if you're not in debt, you're allowed to request from a utility that you can have a credit meter installed. So those customers remain on prepaid because they view it as convenient. And with OVA, we're targeting that kind of customer. So a customer that is on prepay out of choice, but wants a smarter version of prepay. So they like that managing their balances on a daily or weekly basis, and but they don't want to go down to the shops anymore. And that's kind of the target we focus on. So I guess, as you would expect, those customers tend to be lower income. We find our pay monthly proposition much more appealing to the wealthier demographics. Age-wise, though, we find our prepay, including the Smart Prepay, appeals to a wide range of age groups, and it's more in line with the age distribution split in the UK. So we don't find that we're over-indexing in the younger demographic like you might expect. We find, the older demographics are not the very older demographic, 70 plus is not adopting this technology, but we find, that it is popular throughout the age range, mainly due to the convenience. As you get to the kind of retirement age, in the UK especially, budgets can be tight, people have a fixed pension income, and so managing energy using a prepaid solution is very popular, and what ours does in essence is remove the need to go down to the shops, which for the older demographic is not appealing. I guess it's worth also pointing out that smartphone adoption in the UK is quite high, and therefore our offering leverages smartphones, but it also leverages, I guess, traditional SMS-based top-ups and things as well. So the majority of our users do use the app, but a lot use, I guess, more traditional payment methods that leverages the smart infrastructure that's in place. So you can set up notifications via SMS or via the app. It's an interesting one actually. It's not kind of the young student population that you'd expect exclusively. We have a good demographic a good range of demographics across the board.
Rex wants to know, and well, I think this may be one for you as well, and for Philip, obviously, if you have something that you'd like to add, please just let me know. What is the single largest incentive for a customer to adopt for prepayment in Great Britain? Is it just a cool factor, or is it financial incentives, or is it a feel-good factor as being seen as being mindful of how they use energy? Or is it just pure neuroscience of cutting down consumption when they see what they actually use, like with other commodities, say gas or groceries?
It's an interesting one again. I think all the ones called out are probably a combination of the both. Biggest single factor, I think if I was going to give not the best answer, would probably be price-based, and the question is, what is that price driven by? I.e., those consumers are not necessarily as acutely aware of a kilowatt-hour price. They tend to view it as a amount spent per day on energy or week on energy. And so I guess it becomes two things. One, they can use less energy with the control that this gives them, and two, for us, the unit rate is relatively competitive as well versus the traditional prepay offering they may be on. So I think for me it's a number of factors. We can serve those customers cheaper because we've got a smart meter in place, because we have no meter readings, we don't have meter related issues such as if I insert in a prepaid card every day, the meter gets worn out and needs replacing say every 2 years. The smart meter will last more than 10 years. So we've got a lower cost to serve those customers. The customers use less, and it's more convenient because they no longer have to go down to the shops. just out of interest on the credit market, so on the sort of what we call pay monthly, but in your sort of traditional pay in arrears customers, in the UK it's a very, very price competitive market. And I'd say no one really is effectively acquiring customers or retaining customers based on anything other than price. But in the prepay market, there's a lot more factors that come into play, and it makes it a kind of more rewarding market to be involved with, not just financially, but you can service customers' requirements in more innovative ways.
Okay, Phil, would you like to add something to that?
Yeah, I have to agree with what Will's been saying, but I think also there's this drive because, as I said earlier in my presentation, a lot of people want to pay for what they use before they use it or as they're using it, rather than getting the sort of surprise bill at the end of the month, at the end of the quarter. And certainly a lot of my family, and so they're very creditworthy people who don't have prepaid meters, they all say to me, when we're going to get one of these, smart prepaid meters, because I want to be able to pay for my energy as I use it. And I think it does give a very good cost message. I mean, I'm a sad person because I've been involved in ICT design, in home display designs for a long time. And at one time I had about 8 of these things on display, all trying to be hooked into my meter, looking at how the interface work, but also because it gave a cost message. You're looking at these predicted displays saying you're currently using X pence per hour, and then it predicts what you're going to spend in a day and then what you're going to spend at the end of the week. Why am I using so much? You've already gone down the route of the energy light bulbs. You suddenly start realizing you've got things on standby and other devices you hadn't thought about that are actually ticking away in the background. And it does bring out that cost message. And I think, when people suddenly realize that their money's going out fairly quickly from a prepaid point of view, they will start wondering about, why they're spending so much. And that could be a sort of a cost reduction message, which, they would be very keen to sort of have happen, because as I said, it's all about reducing the energy consumption, reducing the CO2 target. I think that's part of that. But yeah, I mean, in terms of demography, we did surveys with NIE at the early stage of the projects. And a wide range of people, were up for it. In fact, the only people who were really against it were the very young, what I would call the yuppies. And they could tell you almost to the day when they were going to get their final demand letter, when they were going to get their disconnection letter, and then, they'd pay the bill. But, people in their old age and the middle age, prepaid customers who use physical tokens, adopted the keypad technology very, very easily, as did a lot of the younger people. They just liked the way they're paying for what they were using as they went.
Maximilian has come back with, he asked the question originally about the gas meters, and he says what he meant was that assuming 41% of gas meters installed by 2015 are smart, or 344,180 in total, how will this share change by 2020? I don't know. Is this a question you'd like to take offline?
No. I mean, the government has mandated targets. I mean, what will basically happen if you look at the impact assessment model? Again, these things are available on the internet under the smart metering. If you Google smart metering, there is an impact assessment. There is a sort of they predicted initially there'll be a rise in installations, obviously, as the thing gets underway, and then for a couple of years there'll be a maximum installation rate going on. Then as you get to the harder to installs, the harder to reach, as the out of the way areas, that will tail off. The volume will grow because the government's mandated everyone, unless they opt out, will have a smart meter. So if a customer has a smart meter, the obligation is on the retailers to provide those meters and provide statistics, how they're doing in terms of the rollout. And I think there will be financial penalties if they don't achieve it.
Okay, and then a follow-on to his question was, do you think that the average price per meter, and he says, he quotes here about $183 for an electricity meter and about $286 for a gas meter, is that the main barrier to success of the rollout in the UK?
Ooh. You might have to ask the purchaser that, Will.
Will, do you have a feeling on this, or is this a question you'd also like to take offline?
Sorry, what was the question again? Could you just repeat it for me?
Do you think that the average price per meter for electricity, about $183, is the main barrier to the successful rollout in the UK?
I I don't know where the figure comes from, but I guess just on meter pricing and barriers to rollout. In the UK, we have a concept of meter asset providers. So in essence, the utilities and the networks don't run the meters on their balance sheet. So it's a supplier-driven rollout, i.e. to identify and convert customers to smart meters and create the demand. However, the meters are more than likely going to be funded by third-party institutional investors, and we run on their balance sheets, so not on the utilities balance sheets. So, I guess I'm happy to speak candidly about this. From OVO's perspective, I have a marginal increase in my operating costs associated with that customer, but there's no capex barrier. So, in the UK, I don't believe that meter price or installation price is the big problem, because all suppliers, because it's mandated, have the same increased OPEX over time. And I say OPEX, you could put it in your COGS, or you could put it below the line. It depends where you want to put it. But I don't believe that's the barrier, because we all have the same burden, and the marginal differences in price and installation that we pay is relatively going to get washed over, I think, in the whole wash. The thing that's, I think, the biggest one at the moment is building value propositions, so customers value what you've given them, and it's not just a case of giving away a piece of expensive technology that increases your cost to serve in the very short term if you don't do anything useful with it. And B, focusing on how do you get meters out there quickly and in a sort of efficient way. So because it's supplier-led rather than network-led, you don't get the sort of density benefits that you've seen in, say, Australia or some of the US rollouts, whereby, it's state-by-state, network-led, so they can go door-to-door and get very high density. In the UK, we're finding we have to convert customers to create density of installation, which is relatively difficult to get a lot of people on one street who happen to be our customer to want to have a meter on the same day. It's not as easy as you'd think. So I'd say installation is the biggest barrier.
Okay, then another question. With regards to the radio technology that is used, why should customers pay for the energy consumed to operate the smart meter, especially for people who are using social tariffs? And then also, who pays for the radio access in your solution? This is from Michael. Will, I don't know if you would like to take this one.
I can pick up that. So, consumption of the meter to support the network comms, Phil should know the amount in watts, but my assumption is it's going to be pretty much nil. So, for example, the CAD or the gateway device I deploy, I think, is has a power rating of 0.1 watts, 1 watt. It's pretty negligible, so it can be on for a long time. Yeah. If a customer wanted the rebate, I'm sure we could do it for them. It's going to be about 10p, so I'm not too worried about it. So I don't know what it would be in the meter, but it's providing power to a SIM. It's going to be pretty negligible. So yeah, not an issue in the UK. In terms of the network costs, we use GPRS in the UK, and it is paid for by me as the retailer. And it is the model in the UK that those costs for SMETS 1 and SMETS 2 will be borne by the retail businesses. So we define how much communication we want with that meter, whether it be daily or weekly or monthly, and we define the size of those packets. Obviously, there's a bit of manufacturer level competition in terms of making those more efficient. But after that, it's over to us as the utility to make sure that the value proposition that we deliver, i.e. if I want to communicate with the meter more regularly, can be justified against the increased communication costs.
Okay. Then a question from Christoph. In your smart prepayment, the money is transferred onto the meter, so the smart meter does all the calculation and contains all the vendor logic. Is there anyone with experience in thin smart prepayment? Do you have a central database with customer accounts and recalculate their daily credit? He's saying if you have that kind of setup, it's easier to change tariffs, top-ups, etc. And the communication from then toward the meter is only necessary for consumption readings and switching on and off if the account is at £0 and when payment is done. Phil, do you have any? Sorry, Will, would you like to take that one? Will?
Yeah, okay. So I guess this is a really, really interesting one. Thin prepay is something I personally have looked at a lot, and I find it a really interesting area. If I believe correctly, New Zealand adopted this model for the thin version, and I guess where a utility's got a large billing system in place, in many ways it makes sense to continue to leverage that and just push commands to meters. I guess a couple of things we came across was if communications to those meters is intermittent, or even if you've got a very, very tight SLA with your communications provider, nonetheless, by definition, it at some point will not always be perfect. If you sent a disconnect command to a meter, you need a way of reconnecting that meter. So you need some sort of localized ability to reconnect the meter in the event of no comms. After that, I mean, yeah, I think there's merits in the thin, I think there's merits in the thick, and it really depends on, what the market. So in the UK, we've defined a thick prepay solution based on what UTRNs, so the unique transaction reference numbers, allow us to do. So in the UK, UTRNs under SMETS 2 are only going to be for financial transactions. So running a thin prepay solution in the UK under SMETS 2 will leave you at the risk that if you send a disconnect communication to the meter and then communications network isn't up when you want to send a reconnect command, there's no option to locally reconnect that meter. So it's impossible to run thin prepay in the UK. So you'll have to run either on the meter prepayment or credit. However, in other geographies, it could be viable. I guess there's a question about where should the intelligence sit. Decentralized calculations is becoming more popular, especially kind of in the world of the cloud and stuff. It makes sense in some ways to use lots of mini servers to do the calculations and just do VENs. You've got to obviously get down calorific values for the gas every day. You have a relatively high burden of proof in terms of getting accurate reads. You've got to make sure that the validations work centrally. And I think there's a lot of merits to doing it locally because it gives consumers more control and allows for kind of a decentralized server architecture. So I think there's positives and negatives to both, and it really depends on a lot of the dynamics in the individual market you're considering, and really what is it that you're trying to avoid and achieve, really, because if customers being off supply is a big no-no, then I think the thin poses some challenges.
Paul?
Yeah, I have to agree. I mean, you've got to remember part of the sort of smart prepayment world is to engage with the customer. If you've got a back office system and you're not providing regular updates to the customer until a disconnection or a low credit occurs, then you're going to get this negative feedback from the customers again. By having, like you said yourself earlier, Claire, a meter in your house, you can look at the display, see what you're consuming, wonder why your account's going down so quickly, and realise perhaps you're consuming too much per leaving some appliances and so forth on. If that data is not displayed some way on a regular basis, easily accessible to a customer, then you're losing some of the benefits of smart prepayment and smart metering in general. There's a lot of work being done on back office systems and on centralised systems and intelligence in the meter, and I have to agree, Will, that the intelligence in the meter is obviously a lot more benefit to consumers than having it in a back office system. Particularly as you're at also the whim of the communications infrastructure. If towers go down or the comms is lost for whatever reason briefly, and the customer can't top their meter up or be told that their low alert has happened, then you've got this negative feedback again from within the customer community on the smart metering world.
Okay, thanks so much. Well, I think maybe this is one that you can answer from obviously your experience at OVO. How does emergency credit work? And in the UK, are there many customers that have zero balances? And that's from Majid.
Do you know what? I actually think Phil's in a better place on how it works. But
okay.
Phil built a lot of this. But if I could say on our customer base, with prepay, we find the majority of customers run a credit, albeit modest, on the prepay side. I guess that's probably about as much as I could share without going into commercially confidential stuff.
Okay.
Yeah. You got to remember that emergency credit, I suppose, was almost GB specific at one time. It came about because of the token solutions. In the early days of token meters, the only place you could top up your smart key or smart card was at a shop owned by the energy retailer. And as these shops basically ran the same hours as normal shops, if you want to top up your token out of normal sort of business hours, you couldn't get into the shop to top it up. And these were later sort of addressed by the retail network service providers that came on offering almost like 24/7 newsagent type top-up outlets. But in the early days, they had to make sure customers who, for a legitimate reason, were running out of credit, weren't disconnected at weekends or on a Sunday when they couldn't actually top their token up. So the concept of emergency credit was effectively like a bank loan. I, as a retailer, would give you £5 or £10 of credit to last you over a period till you get your token sort of recharged. If that token wasn't recharged, an emergency credit ran out and the meter disconnected. Either way, whenever you charge your token next time, you had to repay what was effectively a loan from the retailer. So if you're a £5 emergency credit, your £5 was used up, you'd have to buy at least £6 to repay the £5 you owed from the overdraft effectively, and then put the meter into £1 credit before the switch would reclose or the valve open in the meter. And it's just been born in the industry, based on the token solutions, and it's been there ever since. It's become an accepted thing that retailers will offer this effective loan to help customers out. In some ways, it was overcome by the project in Northern Ireland, and then in the Republic of Ireland later with the keypad solution, because it offered a friendly non-disconnection capability. So by offering no disconnections out of business hours, so between the hours of 4 o'clock in the evening to 8 o'clock in the morning, weekends and public holidays, people didn't have to worry that they were going to get disconnected during unsocial hours. However, any debt they accrued, because obviously the more money they were sort of going into arrears, that would have to be repaid, because once the friendly credit period ended, the meter would then disconnect them. But again, you can see on display how much you owed. And it's quite often, if you look at the VEN traffic in the Irish market, on a Monday morning, there's very high volumes of vending because people are obviously coming out to the social non-disconnection period. The sun rears and that they don't top up in the next few hours, they're going to disconnect.
Okay, Majid, I hope that answers your question. So Jason wants to know, why does the meter need so much decentralized intelligence? You mentioned mobile telecoms prepaid is a similar model, but in that case, all the billing intelligence is centralized. Surely a connected dumb meter with remote on-off would be more cost-effective. I think you answered that partly with the slim prepaid, but is there anything that either one of you would like to add to that question?
Yeah, I've just been reading through the questions. It's Will here from OVO. There's a bit of a theme on the thin versus thick. I guess there's a lot of... I agree that it's not a black and white decision. I think... like you say, in the mobile world, it's centralized, and that's because the calls are connected centrally, whereas with this, there's other factors to be considered. I think providing visibility from a centralized, calculated balance is quite feasible using connectivity. I guess for me, one of the interesting points raised in the questions was around... and one that we hadn't really looked at that much at ARD was the incentives for consumers to try and commit fraud. So with a thick meter, I guess your fraud has to be relatively advanced, i.e. you need to make the meter, you have to probably vandalize, break, or do something quite significant to the meter to make the thick meter not go off it, probably bypass it, for example. With the thin mode, you've got quite a large incentive on because consumers realise that if they prevent the disconnection command reaching the meter, they have a relatively reasonable period of friendly credit until you come around and make that comm get there. So you probably need a thick solution anyway for customers who want to tamper with comms. I mean, overall, I do think there's merits to both, and it really depends. You can significantly reduce your costs of your meter deployment by going with thin and accept some of the sort of propositional and consumer-related challenges that are there. Or you can put it in the meter. I think it really depends on your market. I mean, from my perspective as an energy retailer, we looked at both, and we've trialled and run both, and I guess have to adhere to the regulatory constraints we have in the UK, and we'll go with a model that works best there. But I do think in other markets there's merits to exploring and looking at both, depending on who owns the asset, whose problem it is if the asset's disconnected, consumer behaviour, propensity to debt, propensity to commit fraud, and all those sort of factors. And I don't think it's black and white which one's the best in any given situation, but I do think if stick is the solution that someone wants to go for, the meters we're using work very well in that space, especially with the UTRN capability.
Phil, anything from you?
Yeah, I'd have to agree with Will. I think each of these projects needs to be sort of looked upon in isolation to some extent, and there was a lot of research done by the government, into this before they came out with their specifications. And it almost boils down to like a balance sheet. What are the pros and cons and the benefits that can be provided? Certainly the thick meter provides a lot more functionality, a lot more capability to customers and to the retailers themselves. And I've always been an advocate of a thick solution. It does have its benefits having a centralized system, but you're more heavily reliant on comms to provide information, and you trying to do some of these things in real time, where having it almost like effectively a computer in the house doing the energy sort of measurement and display and consumption data. It's more effective to have it locally than it is to actually have it centralized and rely on the communications network. You can imagine the uproar of several thousand customers because a network tower had gone down, weren't receiving data, or suddenly disconnected because they weren't getting the low credit alerts from their meters.
We have time for 2 more questions, and I'm going to address this last one, the second last one, to you, Phil, and that is there a meter with all 3 technologies? In other words, an IHD, a PPMID, and a CAD incorporated into a single meter? And that's from Floyd. Yeah,
I think it's a bit of a confusion. The 3 devices, the in-home display, the PPMID, and the CAD, these are all ancillary devices that fit within the smart home infrastructure. So effectively, as part of the SPETS requirement, the customer will be provided with an electricity meter and a gas meter. Obviously, as the energy measurement devices, they have the option to take an in-home display, which will connect to these meters. Now, if they're in prepay, at the moment, the specification just basically says there is a certain amount of prepaid data which the meter and the IHD must display. Now, as I was saying earlier in my presentation, because of the position of these meters, there is recognition that they're not always in an easily accessible place. And on the very rare occasions when you do have to enter a UTRN manually, a device on the coffee table or more local than outside in the garage, and you're out there in the snow trying to key a code in, or climbing under the stairs with the cobblers and the spiders, a PPMID is a better device. It is effectively an enhanced IHD. Now, this could be offered in addition to or instead of an IHD. It depends on what's being offered by the particular retailer and what sort of things he's buying from the various manufacturers. The CAD is a different device. The CAD is more of a device that takes data only from the meter. It can't interact with the meters. It just takes data from the meter and says, right, I will make use of this to provide a back office system where you can look at profiles, consumption curves, etc., and maybe an aid to home automation. But these devices all sit in isolation at the moment. There's no one manufacturer. Well, one's offering most of this functionality now, but there's these devices are being seen as separate entities. And my personal view is, you want one device in the home that is your in-home display. If you're a prepayment customer, it gives you the PP mid functionality as well. And if you want to have read-only data going into home automation, the same device should be doing this as well. You don't want to be taking up 3 sockets. You want 3 blinky red LED type devices sitting on a coffee table like a Christmas tree. And remember, this is my view of where I think smart metering should go. So the PPMID, the CAD, and the IHD are not part of the smart meter. They are part of the smart metering system. They sit within the home area network connected by, in the UK market, Zigbee low power radio.
Okay, and then, Will, a last question for you. And that is, are the people signing up for pay-as-you-go those that have already had experience of traditional prepayment services, particularly with regards to electricity prepayment services, or are you seeing a lot of first-time users? And that's from Catherine. And then Michael asked another question which was related to prepayment and addressed specifically to you, and that was, you mentioned that your prepayment users have a longer life. Does that mean that they, because they don't have any debt, or is it just because of the fact that you're offering them a different type of service?
Okay, I've conscious of time, so I'll try and be quick on both. on the first one, we find that the majority of customers are switching to us from someone who's experienced prepay in the past. We are starting to find, I guess, what we call lifestyle switchers, so people who are switching to us for pure convenience. However, I would say, yeah, at the moment, the people tend to come from a background of prepay. There's 4 million prepayment customers in the UK, and we go after those customers, frankly. But we do find that there is lifestyle switches for convenience purposes. I guess ultimately, in our market, we offer you can buy an OVO tariff that's cheaper than our prepayment tariff. If you're not on a prepay meter today, so to then opt to have a slightly more expensive tariff tends to not be the propensity of consumers. There is other utilities with slightly different experiences. I know in Ireland, for example, there's utilities who are exclusively switching customers onto prepay and find that they can grow customers relatively effectively with that proposition. So I think it depends how you want to do that and the price differentiation. On the second question from Michael, which I've broadly forgotten the gist of, sorry. Hold on, let me try and remember.
It was with regards to the fact that your pay-as-you-go customers had a longer life. And was that because as a customer they didn't have to struggle with any debt, or was there other special benefits that they were receiving?
So sorry, on the life one, yeah. Customer life has increased mainly because of satisfaction. I guess a couple of things. One, it's hard for them to find an alternative in the market because our proposition is unique. I think that's over time going to be less and less the case in the UK because there'll be more smart prepay offerings. But the biggest one being that those customers are just very satisfied. They really like the product and therefore are more likely to be with OVO for a longer amount of time.
Okay.
So nothing to do with that.
Ladies and gentlemen, I hate to be the person who is breaking up what is effectively a really good conversation. There are still about 15 questions that I haven't been able to pass on. I am going to be giving the questions on to Phil, and somebody from Secure Meters will get back to you with an answer to your question over the next couple of days. This webinar will also be available within the next 2 or 3 days as a on-demand download. So please, if you would like to listen to it again, and if there's anything that you would like to follow up on, you're welcome to get hold of us at Metering International, and we would be happy to pass any questions that you have onto Secure Meters. So from me, Claire Falkvane, the Managing Editor of Metering and Smart Energy International, thank you so much for joining us. To Will and to Phil, thank you both for your time this afternoon, and I wish you all a fantastic day further. Thank you very much.
Thank you.